Like the tree people that can come along as somebody which will grab the media attention and perhaps focus on our frustrations, and hopefully, even at this late stage, we might be able to get the decision overturned.
How much support have you had from local
It's
people?
been excellent, you know, they've been down, the locals have been down every day, bringing food, blankets, and everything we need, really.
I mean, basically we haven't to really buy any food, so we put more money into the equipment we need to like building defences.
With lunch drawing to a close, it was time to make the weekly pilgrimage to the Cliff Richard camp, armed with the necessary supplies. Thick mud makes the journey somewhat hazardous, but the food made it safely down to be unpacked and shared between the rest of the campaigners.
I thought they were really nice people. You know, it's great to see that people all through society supporting the protection of the land.
There's little hope or optimism now left amongst the locals, but they're determined to fight the second runway to the bitter end.
Personally, I suppose we have to be thinking that it's over in some respects, because we have to think of our future, and that if we have to, you know, to try and find somewhere else to live, if that's what we've got to do. Maybe this campaign can't be won, but maybe the next one will be. What we've lost by all the campaigning with the environmentalists, that another runway somewhere or another road might be stopped because of it. If we lose our battle, then somebody else will win it.
Treatment after violence described as the worst since demonstrations began at the site. Robert Anderson reports.
Business as usual. Protesters today continued their efforts to frustrate security staff, trying to erect a fence close to where the campaigners have set up camp. 2 people were arrested. But last night, 3 police officers and 2 protesters were hurt when an incident turned violent. 1 officer received a broken nose, another was bitten by a dog. 1 person was arrested.
We have repeatedly sent small numbers of police officers to deal with these types of incidents, and that has been successful. We have trusted the protesters in that sense, you know, that they are non-violent people. They have stated that, but quite obviously now they have thrown that rule book away. Or have they? I mean, it remains that we would like to see that the protesters that we've been dealing with up to now deal with it themselves.
The campaigners, who now occupy several campsites close to Manchester Airport, say they too hope the clashes were an isolated incident.
Police are absolutely fine with us until the incident last night. We think it was provoked, or they didn't understand the situation, or whatever, and it was a one-off incident. And if we find, we're doing our own investigation into this, and if we find any violent protesters, they are always thrown off site.
The police have appealed for calm among the campaigners. Robin Anderson, Northwest Tonight at Manchester Airport.
The eco-warriors were enraged when they were initially excluded from Manchester's court complex, arguing that it infringed every aspect of natural justice.
Well, it's a Mexican standoff. We think the judge has been flown in specially from South America.
The protest against the second runway has gained the support of colourful newcomers, like the intriguingly named and eccentrically attired King Arthur Uther Pendragon, age 1,542.
Well, I think it's rather silly at the moment, but hopefully common sense will prevail and the defendants will be allowed to go into court.
Eventually, court officials did relent, and the first of dozens of protesters filed inside. Security men seemed a little uncertain about whether to confiscate the King's sword. Outside, police maintained a high profile, and a dozen officers were posted inside court number 6 itself. The one person mentioned by name on the eviction writ, Daniel Hooper, better known as Swampy, was nowhere in sight. In a hearing behind closed doors, Judge David Shannon announced a 14-day adjournment.
For us it's fantastic. It means we've got extra time. It also means that the judge is prepared to listen to what we've got to say, which the airport never has been.
Within 2 hours of the decision, a contingent of Cheshire Police had begun serving official notifications of the adjournment to protesters at the 7 settlements at the airport, beginning with the Cliff Richard camp. The response was noticeably more hostile when the police and sheriff's officials arrived at Flywood Camp.
Don't touch it!
The serving of the adjournment notices has done little except anger and irritate the eco-warriors. What was a mood of celebration and jubilation outside the courtroom this morning has rapidly degenerated into a bad-tempered slanging match this afternoon. Although the protesters have gained an extra 14 days, only the diehards sincerely believe that they can indefinitely oppose the construction work starting.
The protesters arriving at Manchester Crown Court this morning were hoping to use delaying tactics to stop the hearing from going ahead, but within 3 hours their strategy had failed. A High Court judge granted the airport a possession order, meaning they can now force the eco-warriors off the site of the second runway. The protesters, however, claim the decision is a travesty of British justice, with the judge refusing to consider new evidence.
He hasn't allowed us to put it. He didn't allow us to actually put the documentations to the court. We were challenging the affidavit of the plaintiff, the Manchester Airport, who had actually laid claim that they own all the land. And we then said, oh, well, look, we have documentation here to prove otherwise, and the judge would not allow us to present those documents to the court.
The possession order now means the Under-Sheriff of Cheshire could move in to start evicting the protesters. But with an appeal against the decision now being lodged, it's more than likely he'll wait until the situation is resolved. That's likely to take about 3 weeks.
But the protesters aren't leaving anything to chance. From now on, the camps will be well protected 24 hours a day, and they say they're well prepared for when the sheriff's officers move in.
I should imagine that people at the camp, having heard the decision, will be on full alert. They'll be ready for any attempts to move them off, and no doubt we'll try and resist them at least until an appeal has been heard against the unjust decisions made today.
The tactic now is to seek a judicial review in the hopes of overturning the government's decision on the second runway. Meanwhile, Swampy, the tunnelling eco-warrior, has been fined £600 by magistrates in Crewe for breaching his bail conditions imposed after he tried to damage a wire fence on the site last month.
He arrived back at the second runway site, sad to discover from us that Manchester High Court had this afternoon ruled that the airport owns the land, the first legal step towards evicting the protesters.
It's bad that we lost in court, but you know, I think that we've still got the appeal, and they shouldn't really evict before the end of the appeal, in case it's overturned.
The outcome of Swampy's own court case, also heard today at Crewe Magistrates Court, hadn't been too devastating. He was fined £600 for damaging a security fence at the site and breaking his bail conditions.
My fine? It's all right. Bit much, wouldn't it? But I think they're trying to set an example of us.
Where are you going to get the money?
Dunno. Shan 69 said they'd pay it.
The runway protesters intend to appeal against today's High Court decision.
It's simply not possible for the airport to lawfully take possession of land which isn't theirs.
What evidence do you have that the land isn't theirs?
We have land registry documents which we acquired last week. It's public access information. We had them in court. The judge refused to allow them to be adduced as evidence. That is, in our opinion, a seriously unjust thing to do.
People from Mobberley Village, who also opposed the second runway, this afternoon brought food and water to the protesters.
Well, we heard the decision on the TV, and so we wanted to bring all the food down in case we weren't allowed on, and in case they went down the tunnels and up the trees, so they'd need all the food they could have today.
Protesters are preparing for eviction, but hope it will be delayed by their appeal against today's decision and by their application for a judicial review of the decision to give planning permission to the second runway.
Well, our reporter, Katrina Lewis, joins us now from Manchester Airport. Katrina, the airport have their possession order now, so how close are they to evicting the protesters?
Well, it doesn't mean that they can evict them immediately. What they now need to do is apply for an eviction order, and that should take between 5 and 10 days. But today's decision has been welcomed by the airport as an important first stage.
Well, we heard from that report that the protesters aren't going to take this lying down. What are they planning to do next?
Well, tonight they're ensuring that their site is as secure as possible in case eviction comes early. They want to make it as difficult as possible. Tomorrow morning, as you heard, they want to launch an appeal against today's decision. And they also hope to to get a judicial review, from the High Court of the original planning permission that was given to grant the second runway.
So do you know how the airport are reacting to that?
Yes, the airport say that planning permission was only granted after a full and democratic public inquiry. And they also say that a judicial review could only be given if it was applied for within the first 6 weeks after permission had been granted. So they say that's impossible. In terms of the appeal, they say that it shouldn't delay eviction.
So in fact, to sum up, it looks like the airport believe the law will see them through fairly quickly, and the protesters are looking for any delaying tactics they can get their hands on.
That's absolutely right. The thing that the protesters want is to delay the project for as long as possible and make it as expensive as possible.
Katrina, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
Yes, good morning, Andrew. I hope you can hear me as all the planes are taking off here at Manchester Airport. Young people aged between 18 and 25 make up 16% of the electorate. In the last election, less than half of them voted. We've all heard much about Britain's young, disenchanted political dropouts. But what about the country's politically active young people? Will this election be a chance for them to change things? There's a growing number of young people in Britain that feel so passionately about single issues like animal rights and the environment that they're voting with their feet and taking direct action. But many of them won't be voting in the ballot box this May.
It's not really a choice at the minute to vote for. I don't see that they're really trying to win young people's votes at the minute, or environmental votes.
But surely by voting you could help create a party that speaks the language you want to hear.
I don't really believe the democratic process we've got in this country, like, that they do things for the people.
At this road protesters camp in Guildford, we found 1 in 3 people who were over 18 were registered to vote. Some hadn't made their minds up, but most had decided not to.
We're going to get either Conservatives or New Labour in on the 1st of May, even if the Lib Dems have to come in as a coalition party. Even the Liberal Democrats only want one person, one vote. They don't actually want local government. Nobody's actually going back to the roots again, back to the basic problem is the fact that people in London don't know what's going on in Wales, they don't know what's going on in the West Country or Scotland or the Midlands. Only people in Scotland, the Midlands or the West Country do know what's going on there.
And how could you ever change it if you don't
vote? Basically by standing up for what we believe every year, every month of every year and every week of every year, not every 5 years.
Politicians use a cross on a piece of paper to do what they want. That's what it comes down to.
So who's listening to you? Who's representing what you think about the world?
Me. I'm representing myself.
Not a good idea, according to Professor John Biner, who surveyed nearly 9,000 18 to 25-year-olds. He sees a real danger in not voting.
If you believe in citizenship, you believe that means that everybody's active. Everybody's, you know, letting their views be known, making sure people recognise what they think and doing something themselves through voting at every level. And I think it gives more and more excuse for politicians and the government to take less and less notice of people and involve them less and less if the next generation is kind of opting out. So that's the thing to worry about, that we'll get less and less democracy if people don't exercise the opportunity they've got to use it.
Well, with me now are 3 protesters from the camp, Matt, Denise and Merrick. Good morning to you. Matt and Denise, you're not voting. Merrick, you are going to go to the polls this May, to the polling booth this May. First of all, the voters that aren't, the non-voters, why aren't you going, Matt?
Because there's no party that really represents my interest. They're all the same, really, and why compromise? Why vote for something that I don't believe in?
But as you say, you've got interest. You've got passionate interest. I mean, you live in a tunnel in the ground. You've changed your life because of your political interest. Why not vote?
Because it would, as I say, there's no one that represents my interest. It would simply be a compromise to vote for a half-baked party that may include some of my ideas, but in a watered-down manner.
So how could you ever change that, though, if you don't vote? There'll be nobody ever there to represent you if you don't get involved, will there?
To an extent, we're representing ourselves, and we think that we can change things ourselves, you know.
If we move on to Denise, you did vote in the last election and you've decided not to this time. Why?
I did vote in the last election, but I don't feel that there's much point in voting this time around. The system that voting endorses is getting worse, and I'm not prepared to endorse it myself in any way at all.
Now, Merrick shares all your beliefs, but you will vote. Why?
It's just so easy. I mean, it's like, I don't think it's a be-all and end-all, but it's a simple one day's work. It makes a very small difference, but it's a significant difference, and no one day's work will ever change the world, but it's one good thing to do on one day. I mean, the system is very clumsy and unfair. It's why direct action is so popular because everyone knows that the parliamentary system doesn't work. But
well, you certainly believe that. But hasn't Merrick got one very good point, which is it's so simple, why not do it? Do this, but vote as well.
Yeah, that is a good point, but unfortunately, by voting, you're therefore endorsing and saying, yes, this parliamentary democracy is a good system. It's a system for changing things, when quite clearly a lot of people think that it isn't. It's very slow. We need legislation for the environment now, but unfortunately, the parliamentary system's so slow and clumsy. And
so it's a statement for you
yeah,
to say, I don't want to endorse
this
government,
yeah,
or this
yeah,
form of
yeah,
government, the way they're voted
absolutely.
in. Is that the same for you, Denise? Is it a way of saying, I'd rather we had a different form of democracy in this country?
Absolutely, but it's also that by voting and being a part of that system, you're allowing for a very, very slow process, and we need a lot of very urgent change, and we need it very, very quickly.
Now, we heard Professor Byner say in that film that what you're doing is actually quite dangerous, that it's a form of anarchy that will actually, in the end, not allow you to have a voice at all.
Well, anarchy is another form of political expression, isn't it?
And it's one you're prepared to take?
Yes.
Do you think that there's a danger in not voting? Do you think that you might end up having no voice at all? Is that why you're keen to do it? You say it's simple and you can just get it out of the way quickly.
No, it's the fact that I realise it's still going to be there. Like, well, whatever anybody does on the 1st of May, there's still going to be the same kind of people in Parliament on the 2nd of May, but you can sort of swap a few of them around, and so it's minor tinkering, but it is something they're allowing us to do immediately. But I don't think one vote every 5 years is not enough. You know, a dozen votes in your life is not a significant contribution to life and nation.
You haven't given up on it, have you? Some people say that Matt and Denise have washed their hands of the whole thing, but you still embrace it.
It doesn't work very well. It's very clumsy. It's a very corrupt system, but it's a small, simple tool handed to us on a plate. But we have a vast range of tools for change, and when something is more urgent, you can do something urgent about it, like coming here.
Thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. There's still some time to think about it. Do you think you'll change your mind?
No.
You're absolutely set.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And now back to Andrew in the studio.
Good evening and a cheery welcome to the show that's guaranteed to take you half an hour nearer to your own death. In the news this week, Tony Blair insists there'll be an important role for women in a new Labour government. How to alienate half your audience immediately. In a bid to impress working class voters, John Major resorts to showing off his beer mat collection. And in Cairo, there are fears that the spinal injuries unit are not taking sufficient care of their patients. On Ian Hislop's team is a top Channel 5 comedian, so our apologies to the 40% of viewers who are unable to see him at the moment. Fred Macaulay. Thank you. And with Paul Merton tonight is the first panellist we've had to feel at home in a dimly lit hovel underground since Peter Stringfellow. Please welcome Swampy. In round one, we show the panel extracts of the week's news, and they do an excellent impersonation of people who've never read it. Paul and Swampy, some silent music for you.
Silent music?
Yeah.
That's Tony Blair. There was a band before, I didn't recognise them. That's Tony Blair again. That's the BBC.
A building.
A building, yeah. John Major having an argument with somebody and saying, you're useless. Oh, it's the Spice Girls. He's having an argument with the Spice Girls.
Yes.
I've got no idea.
In fact, did you know there was an election on?
It's not been the foremost thing on my mind, no.
What? There been something else in the papers I've missed?
Coca-Cola Cup, Leicester City versus Middlesbrough.
I
thought there was something else going on. Is it that one of the bands supports the Labour Party and one of the bands is supported by the Spice Girls?
But that's not far off.
So the Spice Girls have said that Thatcher was the original Spice Girl. That's what they said.
Yeah.
She was mad Spice.
And finally in this round, Paul and Swampy, home sweet home.
That's an aeroplane taken off, and there's one behind it.
Has it got something to do with Manchester Airport?
Might be.
Yep. Has it?
I'll just check. Yes. Yes, it has. Yeah.
So someone's tunnelling under Manchester Airport second runway.
And who would do a thing like that, I wonder?
Neil Hamilton.
It's got to be.
Yeah, it's Neil Hamilton.
So what about your new ally then, Neil Hamilton?
Is he?
Well, he was on your side, wasn't he, in
Was he?
Manchester Airport? Yeah.
Right, excellent. Who is he?
Ian, perhaps you'd like to...
Do you not know who Neil Hamilton is?
No, I really don't.
That's terribly commendable. If only I didn't. He won't resign.
Who won't?
Hamilton. Neil Hamilton.
Right,
He won't resign.
Right. Who's he?
This is getting rather tiresome. It's getting like reminiscent of a conversation an old people say.
But what about your mates Digger and Animal, and why are they called Digger and...
Digger?
Yeah. No, Digger, Animal, the Bishop, all these people we read about, or are they fictitious?
I don't know the Digger. There's an animal, yeah.
Right.
And there's a bishop.
And why are they called Bishop and Animal?
Well, one of them's got...
One's had sex with an animal, one's had sex with a bishop.
Swampy has been arrested several times and was recently fined £600, although he explained, "I'll pay the money off, no problem. I earn £550 a week writing for a Sunday newspaper and it only takes me an hour." So, you're obviously new to the job if you spend that long on it. Anyway, at the end of that round, there was a slight musical clue there, I don't know if you caught it.
I think this might be up to me.
Yeah, who are they?
Because there's some people here don't know about soap operas, or soap.
Some people here don't care.
Oh dear.
The protesters, who are believed to number more than 50 on the site, moved in when construction workers using a mechanical digger began hammering iron anchor posts into the ground for the erection of another high-security fence. Security staff encircled the machine as one protester after another tried to rugby charge their way through. Then they began frantically to dig trenches in its path. One of them managed to get onto the digger to appeal for reason, saying the work could cause tunnels to collapse, endangering the lives of protesters inside them.
People are working on the tunnels most of the time, and so it would be a fair bet that there is at least one person down at least one tunnel that is at risk of being collapsed by that digger if it carries on working.
Well, these are the first skirmishes between the protesters and the contractors since the protesters lost their legal fight. It appears the contractors want to put up more fences to divide up the camps, thus making the eviction of the protesters that much easier for the sheriff and his bailiffs. Cheshire police observed the clashes from a distance but then moved in as the confrontation threatened to boil over.
Will you please move away from here? This is your final warning.
One protester, known as Gary, and who's disabled, managed to stage his personal protest before being lifted clear by several police officers. Fearing further arrests and an unwanted depletion in their numbers, the protesters withdrew to prepare for a tougher battle ahead when bailiffs tried to evict them from the Bollin Valley. It left the bizarre sight of a digger surrounded by a human ring of day-glow tunics, but with no apparent threat to its progress. Apart from Gaynor Trafford, a mother of two from Moberley, the village where the runway is to be built.
Well, I've been telling them that the runway is coming through here. It's going through Moberley and knocking buildings down and farms and taking so much of the green belts away.
And their reaction to that?
Some of them were surprised. They didn't realise the extent of the damage it was going to do.
While claiming to put back what it's taking out, Manchester Airport says the environmental damage is an acceptable price to pay for the benefits the runway project would accrue.
How are they going along?
Not too bad. It was a bit fraught yesterday when they were putting that new fence up, but it's all quiet again today. We have people dropping food off every day, and the baker gives us his loaves that are left over. There's a rota going for baths, and they always get a meal when they have a bath, and washing, if people need washing doing, we'll do that for them. And lifts, we give them lifts into Manchester, wherever they want to go. That's got milk, that's got milk, that's got milk, and I think that's got milk.
Bread, milk, there's a water run that comes up maybe 3 or 4 times a week. People donate it. They're very grateful for us bringing it up to them. And without it, you know, it'd be difficult for them to continue their protest.
In 2s and 3s, the Barber Brigade of Helpers make regular supply trips to the camps, often under the close observation of the police. Gaynor Trafford and Sylvia Self have been coming here every day from their homes in Moberley since the protesters moved in. Their bountiful bundles of soya milk, lentils and fresh bread are warmly received, even though some would no doubt prefer pot to pot noodle.
The majority of them here really believe in the environment, they believe what they're doing, and they are supporting us as much as we're supporting them.
The sheriff and his men are expected any day now. The legal fight is over. The physical struggle is about to begin. Even the disabled are prepared to do their bit.
Well, they've got a pulley system, and it's really safely done. It's a pulley system to get me up there. I don't have to climb or anything. I've got a full body harness, and they lift me up and drop me in. I don't have to do anything. And I'm just there then, and all my stuff's up there, my food, water, everything.
They're very safe. The tunnels are well shored up, and we've got plenty of food and water down there to last out for a while with.
How long do you think?
We're hoping for 2-3 weeks.
The protesters have dug deep and stored their food like squirrels. They also intend to lock themselves underground in numerous sealed chambers. When the eviction comes, people like Gaynor will be official observers.
Over the months, we've got to know them as friends. Obviously, we're going to be very, very worried that no one gets hurt.
Gaynor and Sylvia don't know for how much longer they'll be allowed into the site. The protesters expect their supply line to be cut any time.
A siege mentality in what is still only a war of nerves. The trenches and barbed wire of a battlefield are all in place. The protesters and their adversary, the Under-Sheriff of Cheshire, hope violence will be avoided.
It's going to be a return almost to medieval barbarism, the sort of symbology of the Crusades. The protesters are putting the last finishing touches to their castles, ready to draw up their drawbridges and build their defensive stockades. And on the other side, there'll be the sheriff with his band of helpers with their modern-day siege engines, the cherry pickers.
There are 7 camps, dozens of tree houses and 9 tunnels provisioned for several weeks.
The last resort, once people have got through the various doors and traps we've made, is that we have lock-ons, which are basically tubes that are concreted into the wall, and you put your hand down them and you handcuff yourself into them. They have to get Kango hammers and dig the concrete out, and the concrete is full of bits of metal and old tyres and things of varying hardness and texture, so they keep having to change the blades and cutters and various things. It's a slow, delaying tactic.
Police say final preparations by the sheriff are still underway.
Police say the bailiff's side were taken by surprise by the speed at which the legal powers for eviction were granted. At other protests, it's taken months. Here, the powers were granted in just an hour. The Under-Sheriff then had to coordinate an operation involving security personnel, the emergency services, and the teams of professional climbers and tunnellers who moved from protest to protest and who'll be signed up as his officers. Police say he'll move when he's ready.
That's right, they seem to have worked this out very well, the authorities. They are taking media into a pen which is constructed in the middle of the camps, and these are the pictures that we're seeing from there this morning. We have general views of what is going on inside there with climbers who will be attacking the protesters in the trees, but we've also got shots of the actual people who were in black, who attacked the tunnels where many of the people were underground this morning. That's what they were faced with. And the latest addition to the crime-fighting scene and the way that they're going to evict people from this site is the quad bike. They've been actually taking that round to get across this huge site, which of course has 6 camps, and therefore they are going to have to travel over a lot of terrain to get around. We don't know exactly how many people are left on site or how many protesters have been taken off. So far we understand there have been no arrests, and we understand that there are 15 to 20 people still underground. How long they can stay there? Well, we have reports that they have enough food to stay there for months. But will the force of the bailiffs and the police get them out before then? We'll just have to wait and see. Back to you, Kate.
The beginning of the end of the 4-month occupation came at 4 o'clock with the arrival of a convoy of police vans. The protesters sounded whistles and klaxon horns as a warning to other camps of the impending eviction. There were immediate claims of excessive force by the bailiffs, but so far no known injuries.
I'd say it was ruthless, the word they used. They weren't bothered about using violence or extreme threats of extreme violence against me.
Were you injured?
I could have been seriously injured. I really thought I was going to be seriously injured.
That first squad that came in were just there to brutalise people. They were just hitting people and kicking people immediately without any attempt to communicate with them. They're just going in there and wading in.
The situation is that at Zion Tree, which is the camp that was assaulted first, we have 3 people for sure